Okay, big dynamic change right there. Reflects off that back there, you know. Have a skull stuck over there. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. Today we finally have another Batman episode. It has really been quite a while since the last one. Honestly, we've just been very busy and we've had a lot of stuff and a lot of projects that we needed to get to. Is his Bat Gauntlets. I don't know if they have like a dedicated name, like they're actually called something, but essentially what we're talking about is the little bladed fins. I do think in terms of defensive capabilities and some tangential, maybe some contextual things they might be useful for. But before we get into any of that, we need to actually build them. So with that being said, let's get started with the actual build. So when it comes to the Bat Gauntlets, generally speaking, most of the designs are all very similar in their overall concept. So going with any of them, you're gonna kind of get similar results between all of them. But I decided to go with more of the Batman Begins design, simply because it gets used quite a lot in that particular movie, so why not go with that one? So the first thing that I did was laid out a general design on a large piece of steel flat bar and then cut out each segment with the angle grinder. I then took it over to take off a lot of those sharp edges and burrs and put in some bevel. Then after that, it was time to weld it to obviously like a mounting plate, because I'm going to be attaching this to the forearm. We need to somehow attach it. So I'm going to weld them. I think that is the best case scenario. Weld them to that flat bar, which then can be tied around your actual forearms and used to be tested. And then for the last and final step, essentially we just need to sharpen them up so that they're ready for testing. And I gave them a little bit of a paint job because obviously they are for Batmans. So we should at least get the color right for the Bat Gauntlets. But with that being said, very simple, very quick and easy build. Let's get out there and put these things to the test. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Batman, motherfucker. Check these out. These are looking pretty sick, right? Pretty basic, honestly, but it's the concept, right? As always, there is a boatload of caveats that you guys are in for. That being, it's just to test the concept rather than creating something 100% accurate. But these are steel, right? So we should get some pretty good, I would say, analogous results, right? So let's talk about these things, because I find them to be both fun, interesting, kind of useless, but then again, not necessarily, because there is some context where I'm like, you know what, that would be pretty legit. Like for example, right, I think one of the times that we see them used the most is in Batman, the Brave and the Bold. No, it's not Batman Begins. There's a lot of Batman films, all right? The Batman Begins film, where you get, you know, Ra's and Bale. I'm just going to call him Bale for the episode, right? Oh, I can just call him Batman. Why don't I call him Batman? Anyway, tangents. I go on them a lot. Anyway, when it comes to these, they use them a lot in the fight scenes, and I always found them to be, I'm going to block with this, which really just doesn't make the most sense, because you obviously have a blade that you can actually just block with. That's what it's for. So there's a lot of moments where they use these and you're kind of like, I don't necessarily know if that's the best move. It feels like you're using this piece of equipment simply because you have it, rather than it's actually useful. But the context that I would kind of, you know, contrast this with is obviously Batman doesn't fight with a sword most of the time. He is fighting with nothing but, you know, his meat mittens, and he obviously is beating the shit out of most people, which is great, right? And having something like this to be able to, you know, perhaps use in an offensive way, I think is really cool. And they are obviously quite sharp and quite aggressive. But there's a couple of things I want to test with them, and that is their blade trapping capabilities, because that's obviously how we see them used in the Batman Begins, and we'll see if that actually works, if that's functional, and we'll see how lethal these are. Because what I find most interesting about this is the striking capabilities and areas, right? I know I'm doing a lot with my hands, but because it's on my arm, I want you guys to see it, which means I'm doing a lot of puppetry. Hey, that looks pretty good. I was gonna make a second pair, but I didn't have time, honestly. There's a couple of different strikes that you could do, right? I could try and punch past it, like I just said, and kind of like slice it open. I could come for a back swing and essentially try and hook it with the blades, which I think would be the most fucking visceral out of all of these options. Like, yeah, these are sharp fucking hooks, bro. They will some stuff up. They all right? That worked better than I thought, actually. Split it in half. I think they make a lot more sense in defensive applications rather than offensive ones. Simply, you know, if somebody's here, they're hitting you, all that sort of stuff, you have this pretty gnarly, you know, all things considered, forearm protection, essentially. So let's go right here. Can you see that? I'm trying to find, like, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's pretty ensnared. The funny thing was, that actually went pretty deep. Like, it's hard to explain what you're expecting when you do these sorts of things, but let's just say I wasn't necessarily disappointed. That was actually not bad. Let's try again. I'm gonna try with this one closest to my elbow, because it's kind of like the deepest, right? So let's go right. Sorry. It's like a transform. So my crystal ball here reflects off that back there, you know? Sorry, that's a completely different reference. Anyway, let's try and come down. I can't do it without thinking. See, Tony's helmet reflects the light. All right, let's strike down. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, but that did penetrate him. How the f can I do this with showing you what I'm actually doing? If you're enjoying today's episode, you should really consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, this is dumb. This is an additional point that I wanted to bring up. I don't know if I would call it a test, because I can't remember what movie it was in, or what Batman actually used this technique. But using these kind of, you know, what are they called? What are these things called? Gauntlets. Using the bat gauntlets to kind of like stop on a slippery surface, or maybe he was falling. That begins. Was that in Batman Begins as well? So I do think that if I had two of them and I was falling, I do think that they would actually bite in quite deep, obviously being those hooked shapes. Now, do I think that you could actually like climb up something with them? No, but I do think that they would definitely help with breaking your fall if you were sliding down something. Is it on the ice? When they're all fighting on the ice? I think it's on the ice, yeah. Which, see, that makes sense. Ice hooks, right? Same sort of thing. Wow, yeah, like I can... And funnily enough, it does come out quite easy as well, which means they obviously go in one way, but also come out easy in another. I find that to be a little bit more conclusive than I thought. That is actually really a solid connection if you get a nice hook on it. We come in, completely held on by nothing but the bat gauntlet, and easy to take off. We've got two different types of blades here with two different types of shapes and geometries that we will give it a little bit of a test for. Now, I want to make this clear. I have tested an actual sword breaker before, and they are far more effective at applying leverage to blades than one might first assume. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think these are going to be absolutely terrible at this. Reason being, the gap between these blades is huge, because you're not actually applying the leverage here, you're applying the leverage down here, and this gap is a monster, right? This gap here, way too big, but hey, I could be wrong. Let's give it a go. So let's start off with a curved single-edged blade. So like this, for example, can block. It's you know, so long as it's made out of steel, that sort of stuff, you can actually block a blade, and I think even somewhat bring it around, right? I think that's totally possible and plausible, right? So bring it around. It actually does a reasonable job at it. So now the problem is this, right? Now if I try to apply leverage to it in any sort of reasonable way. And keep in mind, he's actually trying to keep it in there. Like, okay, that, there we go. That can apply some torque and leverage. That actually held it in there somewhat reasonably. However, at any moment, retreat the blade. Like he can just completely retreat it. But that did feel like it was applying some torque to the blade. If it lands on the fins, it's just gonna deflect off, right? You can kind of parry it out of the way, which I think is, it's better than hitting your forearm, 100%. Let's see what happens if I catch the blade down in the weak and then try and transition it down into the strong, and if I can apply more force and leverage to it, right? That's not terrible. Like at any moment you can still pull that out, right? But I'm close enough to my combatant to actually launch a counter attack. That's interesting. So, and I didn't have a good grip on it, but I had enough to completely slow it down. And at that point, I'm close enough to actually attack. This time, let's try it with a straight blade, more of a longsword configuration rather than a curved single edge. So let's see if that changes any of the dynamic. Okay, big dynamic change right there. The amount of force that I felt on my forearm was way different. So obviously with a lighter blade, like what we were just testing, it was non-existent. That one, I felt that one was a bit more zip on it. That is very interesting. I think the curve kind of helped bite it in a bit more, because the shape actually, because when I did that with obviously a straight blade, I could not get the same sort of like leverage kind of torque on it as the other one. That's very interesting. All right, last and final test, ballistic head time. So my ballistic head that I brought for testing today has had a little bit of a catastrophic failure, specifically with its neck. So it's sitting on Tony's stool. A little bit harder to actually reach than usual. Anyway, let's just do a couple of quick strikes here and see what we can get. So, okay, that's the point. Okay, yeah, it hooks into the head. Oh, that is insanely aggressive, and honestly, it's stuck. I have a skull stuck over here. Let's see if we can use our technique to pull it out. Man, they hook out like crazy, and we have got blood everywhere. So, pretty visceral, honestly. That hooked into his skull. All right, I'm sold. So I thought I should mention very quickly, just before we finish out with today's episode, why these are actually fantastic for Batman and what their practical function is. I did mention it once in today's episode, but I'm like, yeah, I should probably expand upon that a little bit more. So they're good because Batman is a brawl type character, right? He doesn't really have main offensive weapons. He punches and kicks. And when he fights criminals, he's essentially getting up close and personal and forcing them to do the same. Now, why this is great is because obviously as a defensive item, when people are swinging on him, all he needs to do is keep his hands up, right? And then intercept their punches with these sharp metal fins on his forearm. So they're great for that. They're going to be breaking bones, probably left, right, and center. It's very easy to defend yourself up here with these sharp fins there. For trapping blades, a little bit of nuance here. Obviously, something like a curved blade that we used, I was surprised. It didn't trap it, especially not to the level of a sword breaker, but it definitely did, I would say, make it harder. It kind of was like 50-50, right? Obviously it needs to actually hit in some of the slots and not on some of the top edges, but if you do that, and if you're quick enough to actually get down kind of into the strong of their blade, and you obviously apply the torque and leverage, I think that they are not going to be able to retreat the blade quick enough, and you could actually open them up to an attack, which I found fascinating. And when it came to actually hooking into things, you know, when they are, you know, on the, I believe it's the ice, I'm pretty sure it's the ice, and they actually hook into it to stop them, I 100% think that was, that's legit. Obviously, ice picks are a thing, and people use them, and these essentially act kind of like an ice pick. So, again, functional, and it works. In terms of blocking blows, or blocking, you know, kind of strikes, Yes and no. Obviously, if it's made out of metal and steel, this one's obviously solid steel, so it can block things. And I don't think this one's going to get a tit simply because it's not a main weapon in the slightest. It's obviously more defensive than anything else. I'm just not sure what category we would kind of be ranking it in, so I don't think this one is going to get a ranking today. But that is going to be all. Thank you guys for watching. A lot more, I would say, plausibility in some areas than I originally was willing to give it credence for, but that is why we test these things in the first place. That's going to be all. Thank you guys for watching. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and remember to check out some of the older Batman episodes. We've kind of gotten up to some shenanigans at this point. Good old times, huh? But that's going to be all. Thank you for watching. I think I said that. Bye-bye.